So in a video a while ago, I was talking about competitions and how important it was to warm up, and then I was also talking to my buddy Muhammad, who's a very high-level competitor, and we were talking about warming up and how important it is before competitions. I was also talking to one of my students who's a 3-time college wrestling champion, and we were talking about how important it is to warm up. And in different videos, you guys have asked me about, hey, Chewy, how do you warm up for competitions? And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take you guys today through step-by-step how I warm up. I'm gonna give you some ideas of how I do it, and then we'll clip in some of the videos and stuff like that that we have from the different matches that I've had. The thing about the warm-up that I think is important is that me back in the day, I used to be one of these guys where, maybe you relate with this, that I would go to the competition and I was always the guy that was better in the gym, right? I was really good in the gym. I would go to the competition and then for whatever reason, I just couldn't pull the trigger as fast enough as I should have, or I wasn't as confident, or I was mentally just all over the place. And I think that one of the things that helped this, along with getting better at jiu-jitsu and drilling and all the physical stuff, is my preparation the day of, really zoning myself in for the competition and getting ready for it, right? And doing the proper warm-ups, proper visualization, all that stuff. And so I'm gonna take you through how I do it. Now, let me sort of give you a caveat to this. This is not the only way you can warm up. There are lots of ways to do it. Some people can do it much less. Some people need to do way more. I'm giving you the way that I do it, so hopefully it'll give you a couple of ideas to chew on. And this way you can sort of maybe mix it in with your own routine. You can try things out and see how it works for you. But yeah, with that said, guys, let's jump into the video. And again, we'll start this off as if you just arrived at the venue. So you just walked into the venue that you're getting ready to compete at, and that's where we're gonna start this video. All right, guys, so when I get to the venue, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of figure out which mat I'm on. And again, obviously you would not be in a matted area like this, right? But I'm gonna figure out which mat I'm on. And then afterwards, I'm gonna find a spot to chill, right? I'm gonna go ahead and find a spot either where I've got a group of friends that are already there, or where all of my students and team members have already parked out. And usually we will take our stuff and simply slide it against the wall so that this way we're in a big sort of pile together and we can watch our stuff. After I've done that, depending on the kind of competition that you're doing, the first thing I'm gonna do is, like if I'm doing an IBJJF competition where you weigh in right before you compete, I'm gonna go get on the check scale with my gear on, so I'll change into my rash guard and shorts. I'm gonna go check my weight and see where that's at, right, to make sure I'm on. And then if it's a competition where obviously you weigh in first at the beginning of the day and then you're fine, then obviously I'll go weigh in. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and put my gear on, get settled in, and I'm gonna go ahead and weigh in. All right, guys, so the weight's good, and now I'm gonna start the first process off of kind of getting myself settled in, which is gonna start with layers. So one of the things that I've seen a lot of people do when they go to competitions is that they walk around all day and they don't get their body adequately warmed up prior to it. And for me, I don't know, it depends on the time of year, obviously, but for whatever reason, a lot of times the venues that I go to are very cold, and with very few exceptions. And so the first thing that I like to do when I'm at a competition is get some layers on my body, right? So if I had a gi on, I would have a hoodie that's a little bit bigger than my gi top. I would put that on, but with a rash guard, I'm just gonna put on a t-shirt over top of my rash guard. Boom. Slide on my sweatpants. And I'm gonna throw my hoodie on, right? Now again, this is to just put layers on, keep me warm while I'm kind of just chilling out. Because again, you get to the competition, you might be there for hours just kind of sitting around. And for me, it's a little bit more comfortable to be kind of warm so I can stay relaxed and everything else. All right, now the next step in my sort of pre-match ritual, and if this was a real like getting ready for the competition thing, this gym bag would be super full. I have a video on what I put in my gym bag for competitions. I'll put the link for that down below. But the next step of it is just to kind of relax for a little bit. Unless your match is right up, you would skip this part, but a lot of times you'll go to competitions and your matches may not be for a long time, maybe for several hours. And so you need to stay relaxed in those situations. One of the things that I've noticed from a lot of my students that are new to competitions is that they will get up and they'll cheer for every competition match that one of their buddies is in. They walk around all day. They're not relaxing and conserving their energy. And at the same time, when you're in those competitions, your adrenaline's still there. I mean, you're in a much more heightened state your body's way more excited than it would normally be. And so I've seen this happen. I've seen my students waste tons of energy just walking around, cheering for their teammates, everything else. And then by the time they finally compete at the end of the day, especially this is true for white belts, usually white belts are on the end of the rung, right? Then they get up there and they're exhausted before they even get out and compete. So we want to conserve our energy. So I like to put on my headphones and I like to put on some classical music. And again, this kind of helps me chill out a little bit. I started doing this back in my MMA days where I found that during the day of the fight, I was so like on edge all the time. I mean, because you're getting ready to do something super intense. You and your opponent literally have a license to beat each other up. And so it was a really intense day. And so I would have to put something on to kind of just chill me out and relax me. So I found classical music does the same, kind of does that pretty well. And so I'll put the headphones on, and I'll listen to some classical music and chill out and just relax a little bit. Meanwhile, as I'm sitting here doing this, I will typically, depending on how I feel, if I get to the venue and I feel like a little like amped up a little bit too much, I'll do some deep breathing exercises, really slow inhales, slow exhales, and some pauses. And I'll also do some stretching on the muscles. And again, I'm not doing these for like long holds or anything like that. I'm just gonna stretch out a little bit. I might foam roll a little bit. The foam roller doesn't necessarily like, you know, do anything crazy to the muscles or anything prior. It just kind of feels good and it helps me relax. And so I'll tend to spend that time almost doing like some yoga stuff, some deep breathing, listening to music that chills me out. And that's what I'll do as I'm kind of waiting around for the day, as I'm getting ready and waiting for my match to start. All right, guys, so now it's about 45 minutes out from the match. And again, typically if you go to a competition that's ran well, you'll have some estimation of when you're gonna be on the competition mat and when you're gonna be up. And again, it'll fluctuate a bit, so you always have to kind of keep a check on your mat. If they have an electronic version online or something that you can watch, that's helpful. But again, you want to keep an eye on it. But typically around 45 minutes, I'll start getting myself kind of warmed up and ready. And the reason why I do it 45 minutes is because, sometimes a little bit more, is because if sometimes they run forward and they get going a little bit too quickly, that'll give me at least usually 20 minutes. Whereas sometimes if the matches run a little bit longer, I'm not getting warmed up too early. Again, there's this, you're trying to time it all just right so that this way you get onto the mat and you're right at the right sort of situation. So when I start my warm-up, my actual warm-up, I'll begin with doing some basic calisthenics, some different like running, sprinting, some just basic stuff. You know, you can think of as some Hindu push-ups, some bodyweight squats, normal stuff, some sprawls. And then if I have a partner, I will grab them, we'll pummel, we'll hand fight, we'll grip fight, whatever it is that we're doing. And if we have a mat, which sometimes happens, we have a mat that we can practice on, we'll do like a mock roll. Just kind of move through the motions, flow through the motions. And I find that this, more than anything, getting my heart rate up. I want to get my heart rate going. I want to be super sweaty. I don't know if it was Dan Gable, but I remember in high school hearing this thing from like when I was in wrestling, hearing that you should never step on the mat to wrestle until you're sweaty. And so again, if you're getting ready to compete, if you take your hand underneath your gi or your rash guard and it does not come up moist and with sweat, you're not warmed up, and you need to get warmed up before you step on the mat. You can just think about, like in your gym, I don't know about you guys, maybe you're different, but for me and from a lot of the people that I train with, we don't feel our best, like our best rolls typically don't come until like at least, 1, 2, maybe 3 rolls into training, right? Like when you start rolling. And so that's where I want to get myself to. I'm even really intentional about this when I'm training. Like if I'm rolling in the class, let's say if I got this young college wrestler that wants to roll with me, he'll typically be my second or third roll because, I don't want to roll with him right out of the gate. I'll instead pick someone else that's a little bit, lighter or maybe not as physical or not as technical, and I can warm up with them first and then go with the tougher people over time. This way I feel my best and I'm ready to go. And also it's very important for prevention of injury. But with that said, again, this more than anything is the thing that sort of gets rid of that nervousness, right? So your body's all pent up and you're getting that, you have that performance anxiety, that performance excitement because you're getting ready to do something. And in those moments, a lot of times over the years, especially on like with big matches or fights that I had coming up, I would almost have this weakness in feeling in my grips and in my legs and everything else from all the adrenaline that was going. And by doing a good warm up, right, like running and sprinting and doing some calisthenics and hand fighting and really basically trying to put myself through a couple of timed rounds of fighting and rolling and everything else, which I'll typically do 2 rounds essentially. So if my round is 6 minutes, I'll do 2 rounds with a little bit of rest in between at a moderate pace to get the blood flow going. By doing that, it like shakes all the stuff. I get a release out of my body, and then it's after that moment, I feel good, I feel clear, I feel ready to go. And that's been really useful to me. I started doing this really like intentionally when I was fighting, again, because fighting is just so nerve-wracking when you're getting ready for it. And you'd be sitting around all day day thinking about how the fight's gonna go and thinking about what you're gonna try to do. I'd be all pent up. And then as soon as we start hitting the pads, pop, 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 doing some wrestling in the back to get the body going. And as soon as I would get all that sweat and all get my heartbeat going, I would feel so much better. And then when I got out to fight, I was primed and ready to go, right? And so that's what you're trying to do with this warm up. And again, you can do whatever you want to do, and moderate for you is going to be different than me, right? But you want to do some sort of thing where you're basically trying to get yourself to the point where you would be after like a roll or two. This way your body's warmed up, you're primed, you're ready to go, and you're gonna be your best when you step out on the mat. And so at this point, I'll start with some calisthenics, bodyweight movements, some hand fighting, grip fighting, and wrestling with my training partners. And then this way I'll be ready to go when I step out on my mat. And then again, I'll be doing all of this in layers. So this way I'm keeping all that heat trapped in, because again, there's always unexpected things that are going to happen. And as a competitor, you have to be careful because it's so easy to get agitated when something changes. Like for instance, I had a situation at the Fight to Win years ago where I was out there and I was getting ready to compete and I did everything right. I timed everything right. I'm getting ready to step up and walk on stage, and then they say, hey, sorry, the feed went down, the live feed went down online. So then they said, give us a minute and you'll be up. We have to get this live feed back up. It was 30 minutes. Right? So luckily I had my hoodie and everything on, and I was able to keep my heat in. I waited a little bit. I got warmed back up about 5 minutes before and I was fine. But again, had I taken all my layers off and been sitting out there in the cold area, I wouldn't have been as warmed up prior to the match. And again, just something super, super important to get yourself primed up so this way you're ready to, again, just like you do in the gym, you're ready to compete just like you are in the mats. And one thing I forgot to mention is that when I'm getting warmed up for my matches, when I'm doing all the calisthenics and I'm doing all the pummeling and hand fighting and stuff with my training partner, I will then switch my music from that, nice, calming classical music or whatever it is I'm listening to, and I'm going to put it onto a song that gets me pumped up. And again, I don't know what it is, but there tends to be this thing where when I go to the competition, for some reason I find like one song that tends to kind of get me in the mode of getting ready to compete, and that ends up being my song, and I tend to listen to it almost on repeat for the entire day. Sometimes I do this when I write. I have music playing and I'll have like a song playing, and it's like I'm not even really listening to the song, it's like just this beat getting me ready. And so a lot of times on the competition day, I'll have a couple of songs, one or two, that are just kind of getting me into the mental state, and I turn those on once I'm going through the process of warming up to kind of get my body charged up and ready to go. All right, guys, so now we're getting ready to step on the mat. This is like the moment right before you step on the mat. For me, this is the moment where I've really got to be mindful of my thoughts, because again, I'm getting ready to step on the mat, and it's typically at this point, whether it was an MMA fight where I'm getting ready to walk to the ring, or it's a jiu-jitsu match where I'm getting ready to step on the mat, that my thoughts could go in the wrong places. And so this is the point where I'll have my headphones on, my hoodie will be up, I'll be watching the other match, just kind of seeing when it's going, but in my head, I'm just going through my moves over and over and over again. If you guys have watched the channel, you've heard me talk about visualizing, right? So there are even studies to back this up, but doing mental reps. So in my head, when I'm getting ready to step on the mat, the only thing that I'm thinking about, I'm not thinking about winning, I'm not thinking about losing, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm thinking about how can I hit, or how am I going to hit my techniques? Which setup am I going to use to hit my initial techniques, my takedowns, my guard pulls, my sweeps, whatever. What is my game plan going to look like when I get out there and compete, and how am I going to do all those things? That's the only thing that goes through my mind. And if something else tries to get in there, I immediately push it back and go back to my techniques. When I was younger, when I was like a really young competitor, I remember I would like look at the cross of the guy and look how big he was, or whatever, how many patches he had on his gi or something, or whatever stupid thoughts you think about the day of, and that'd always get in my head. So now I only think about what I'm going to do on that match, and that helps me out a lot, because again, I'm not focused on winning, losing, I'm only focused on what I can control, which is my techniques, and that's been very helpful to me over the years to be much more aggressive. I also have a mantra, right? I've talked to several high-level competitors, and they have their own little mantra, and again, everybody's gonna have their own. One of our guys here, who is a college wrestling champion 3-time, he will say, you're more than this. That's kind of his mantra. So no matter what happens, you're more than this match. And for me, mine is no hesitation, because that was the thing I struggled with a long time ago, where I wouldn't pull the trigger. I'd go out to the match, and I would really, I wouldn't just go after the person like I would in the gym. And so I had to train it in the gym, and I had to really focus on that stuff. So when I'm here, I've got my headphones in, I'm focused, and I'm visualizing what's going to happen. And again, I would recommend you guys do something similar. Really focus on your game plan, your techniques, and then afterwards, when they call you out, boom, you take your stuff off, and you get ready to go. And again, at this point, you should be warmed up, you should be ready, you should be mentally ready, physically ready, And the goal is that when you get on the mat, you will be the same person that you are in the gym when you compete. So I just got done with a tough match, right? Obviously I did because I'm not even sweating. But assuming that you just got done competing, right? This is another thing that I think people make mistakes with. Okay, so I just got done competing. I might need a few minutes to kind of cool down and relax, right? To kind of catch my breath and just sort of cool myself down. But then at that point, one of the things I do is I immediately, because if I've got other matches coming up, I immediately put my layers back on. Because again, in jiu-jitsu tournaments, more so than wrestling, we don't get a lot of rest. So a lot of times with the exception of I did the ADCC trials a few years ago, and they gave us like 45 minutes to an hour, which was nice. You could rehydrate and everything else like that. That was super helpful, especially because I was competing against some young 20-something-year-old black belts. But at this point, I'm gonna put my layers back on because at most jiu-jitsu tournaments, you probably only got like maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to cool down. And so again, I want to keep that warmth there. Imagine going to your gym, rolling really hard with one of your training partners, sitting on the bench for 20 minutes, not doing anything, and then getting cold again. It's not going to be a good idea. So again, I want to put my layers back on, my hoodie and everything else, and then I'm going to sort of zone in and get ready for the next match as it comes. And again, the big thing that I want to share with you guys too is you do all this stuff, and obviously your prep may be different than mine. I'm giving you some ideas to chew on, some ideas to possibly use because these have worked for me, and really zoning in and finding your particular warm-up that works best for you is really important as a competitor. But understand this, with that said, you're gonna try to do all your prep work, you're gonna try to do everything perfectly. Every competition, and it's happened without fail, has always had some wrench thrown in there, right? I've never been to a competition where everything just happened perfectly. And what I mean by perfectly, I mean is like the timing, right? There's always been like a match got pushed forward or pushed back, or all of a sudden, I remember there was one competition where they like a whole division just like ambulance. A whole division basically didn't show up, and then I'm sitting there drinking a smoothie that I got at the little restaurant that they had in the venue, and all of a sudden they're calling my name, and my students are like, "Chewy, you're up," and I had to warm up in the match with a belly full of smoothie, right? I ended up winning the match, thank God, but again, not the most ideal situations. And the thing that I have to repeat this to my students a lot is, when you are getting ready for a competition, you're accessing the warrior inside of you, right? And it's so easy in that state of mind to get agitated by the littlest things, right? Someone changes your division, they move your time up, or your mat gets moved over here, or something. The littlest things can just drive you nuts. You can't focus on them. You have to focus on the things that you can control, and only those things, your techniques, your warm-ups, all that stuff, your mindset, the things that are going through your brain. Those are the only things you can focus on, because if you let yourself get sidetracked into worrying about that, it'll ruin your performance. And so again, that is how I get warmed up for my competition. It's not crazy complicated, it's pretty simple. The big things to understand is that I want to make sure that I conserve my energy early on. When it's time, I kind of keep a track of what's going on with the mats. When it's time to get warmed up, I get myself warmed up, and I really try to ramp up my heartbeat and my heart rate so that I can feel that, get through that initial rush of adrenaline, and also get through that initial sort of warm-up phase that I would go through when I'm training. Shake it all out, have that mental clarity that comes from that, and then keep those layers on. So this way, when I get out there and I visualize and I step out on the mat, I'm basically the same person that I would be inside of the gym, maybe even a little bit better. In fact, most of the time these days, I feel like when I do compete, I'm better than the person I am in the gym. And when I was younger, it used to be the opposite. It used to be the guy who was way better in the gym than he competed. And I think a big part of that was really being detailed with my warm-up. So with that said, guys, hopefully this is helpful to you, whether you're a veteran competitor, maybe you got some tips out of this, or you're a newbie and you just need an idea of what the hell's gonna happen when you compete. Hopefully this is useful to you guys. And yeah, hopefully that's useful to you, and I'll talk to you next time.